It's often easier for people to show you things than they are to express what they're thinking.
Hello and welcome to episode 104 of the Smart Agents Podcast. My name is Michael Walter and I'll be your host. In today's episode, we are joined by residential architect Heidi Bolyard. Throughout her career, she has created countless sanctuaries for her clients. Heidi first began working with local real estate agents when they started to hire her to do walkthroughs of their own clients' houses. Today, Heidi teaches agents how to leverage the same level of detail as an architect to help your client find their dream home while getting you more sales. Now, before we get on to today's featured interview, make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents Podcast. You can find the show on all major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and now Amazon Music. Also, if you or someone else on your team has an awesome story or a tip to share with our community, send us a message at feedback@smartagents.com. We're always on the lookout for new stories to share. All right, let's get on to today's featured interview with Heidi Bolyard. I really enjoyed our conversation and I hope you do as well. Just getting started, if you could, just introduce yourself a little bit to us, where you're at in the country and a little bit about your expertise.
I'm Heidi Bolyard. So I'm located in Dublin, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus. And I've been a residential architect for over 20 years, for 22 years, which is hard to believe. So I own a company here called Simplified Living Architecture. But then I also use my expertise as being a residential architect and doing custom homes and house renovation projects to train real estate agents how to think like an architect. So to give them different skills when they're helping their clients find their dream home. So teaching them the same skills that I've used to create people's dream homes.
Right, because I think, and I want to touch a little bit more on how you got into architecture and really the residential architecture. But I think obviously when somebody is, doing a showing, you're trying to help those clients picture their life in the home. And
absolutely.
A big part of it is, hey, if we shift things around in this house, how does it fit your life? Because that house, it is moldable to their life. Yeah.
Just because one family is using a space as a formal dining room doesn't mean that the new homeowner needs to. So it's kind of helping them think outside of the box for what the spaces could be used for so that it can best fit their needs.
Right. So how did you really get into residential architecture?
It was high school. So in high school, I needed to take an elective. I went to a smaller rural school. We didn't have a whole lot of opportunities. So our counselor said, why don't you try this residential drafting class? So I absolutely loved it. And then I've stuck with it. It's crazy because that was like close to 25 years ago. So.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. So we had a drafting class, but the teacher left like 2 weeks into it. And so I loved it. And it fell apart. The class fell apart. So I never got to do that, but it was amazing. And I can see how that really kind of sparked an interest.
Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of fun. And then, I did it the second year and then, ended up doing it in college and then just stuck with it. And it was fun in college to design the larger buildings and commercial projects and things like that. There's just something with working with homeowners that's a lot of fun, like creating something that's theirs. Like it's not working with the board of directors where it's going to transition to, other people. It's their space. It's their sanctuary, the retreat. So.
Right. Yeah. I think that's got to be really gratifying to be able to, have such a role in, building these lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you get involved in, really wanting to help agents be able to kind of think, like you said, think like an architect to help their clients?
I think the biggest thing is that the clients that we have, it's putting themselves out there to hire an architect, which not everybody's in the place to do. They think that it's outside of their reach oftentimes. So finding a way to help more homeowners. So, homeowners are always using real estate agents to help them find their new home, or at least they should be. I have plenty that like to think they can do it on their own, but a real estate agent just gives you a whole different level of service, and it's going to put, you're going to find a home that you wouldn't have necessarily found on your own. So being able to teach real estate agents how I create dream homes for my clients just gives more opportunities for people to really find that home that works perfect for them and for their lifestyle and for their family.
Right. So, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about what, how you are doing this for agents. Is there, courses? What are you doing to kind of help get them in the right mindset?
Yeah, so we have a couple different things. We have an ebook, but our most beneficial thing that we do is we have a 4-part framework called SOLD. So it helps real estate agents simplify the process for themselves and for their clients. And then the O in SOLD is for outlining. So really outlining what the goals and the needs and the dreams are for their clients. And then the L is the layout of the home, like we had already spoke about or touched on, about just just because it's a dining room now doesn't mean it needs to be a dining room. Kind of looking at all the spaces in the home, like finding out what spaces are too large, what are too small, and what can kind of be reworked to, pretty easily so that it can align with the homeowner's lifestyle. And then the D in SOLD, the final part of the framework, is just the details within the home. So looking at the structure of the home, whether it's somebody wants to remove a bearing wall or just even being able to look at the structure while you're at the showing, just to look and see if it is in pretty good shape. Not that you don't need to hire someone to come in and look at the home, but at least have a good feeling for it. But then also the other details of mechanical systems and the windows, all of those things.
Right. So kind of starting from the beginning, when agents are working with their clients, how important is it, and is it something that you kind of stress to people, that really know who your client is, so that when you are showing them the house, okay, this is, maybe they're not interested in a formal dining room. Maybe they have several kids, or there's a work from home situation where they need to have that home office space. Because I remember our previous house, we did have a formal dining room. I didn't have a job where I could work from home, but that would have been the perfect office if I needed it to be.
Right. Exactly. Or even too, like people with young kids, like it could be a playroom for your kids temporarily, just while they're at that stage in their life. So creating, thinking through the house and like, what could those different spaces be during the different phases of life?
Right. And then, when it comes to obviously the actual structure of the home, I think that's something that, a lot of agents may not have, especially if they're newer and don't have a whole lot of experience, working with home inspectors, or even just kind of going through the process, knowing like, what are some of those things to really kind of look at, and that they can key in on quickly, so they have a better, they're better able to explain, whether or not a wall is load bearing or not.
Absolutely. So just learning some of those basic skills, because it's really not too challenging to figure out where a bearing wall is. But too, like with other structural things, home inspector can cost several $100s. So if you can at least look at some of the things in the home and give your client an idea of like, some potential issues. I know that when I was looking at for my last home, like the realtor that I used, she went through and she's like, it was built in like, I think the early 90s. So she's like, the furnace is 30 years old. The water heater's 30 years old. Your windows are 30 years old. It all needs to be replaced. So knowing just kind of what some of those things would cost, it's just like, it wasn't the decision that I wanted to make. So it saved her the time of having to put together an offer on the home when it would have eventually, we would have eventually pulled out of it when I realized how many other expenses that were going to be on top of that cost.
Right. And by the fact that she took the time on the front end to explain those things to you. It saved you all that time, with going
And money.
through the process. Yeah, exactly. And the money on having a home inspector come out to that home, you can just bypass that one and move on to the next, where I think that really helps out, your trust in that agent to where you will recommend them later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When people have friends that are like, or when I have friends that are like, oh, I need a real estate agent, I'm like, oh my goodness, you need to call her. She knows what she's doing. But then part of that for a young agent, like when you have a project that, or a home that, there's an inspection going on, make sure you're at that inspection. Like you could be learning from the inspector of what's, different parts of the home, just because I'm in the Midwest. So I know a lot of what's, structural issues and, some things throughout home, settling and things like that are the same regardless where you are. However, there's going to be specific things in your geographic area that your home inspector is going to, be well aware of and well versed on. So just getting that knowledge from them, like they're already there. So you might as well take advantage of being there as well, just to find out. Because oftentimes they're so kind and they're more than willing to point things out to you and teach you some things along the way.
Right. Absolutely. And what it all goes back to that relationship building. They understand also that, the more this agent trusts me, the more business I'm going to get, as an inspector for their listing. So I think that, absolutely. I think it's interesting in the real estate industry, there's so many different, with one transaction, there's so many different professions that all kind of come together to make that transaction go through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think kind of building those, those tribes of people is very important. But for you specifically, and, what you're doing with real estate agents, what's been the reaction to, being able to teach agents to think like an architect?
I think one of the big things is just helping them think differently. Sometimes there's portions of things like they're looking for additional knowledge. They know that they want to grow in the industry. They don't necessarily want it to take as, I know some really successful agents that have been in the industry for over 20 years. The newer agents don't want to wait 20 years to get to that point, to learn the knowledge and to build that reputation. So being able to serve your clients on a higher level just expedites how fast you can grow in the industry.
Right.
And your credibility. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've kind of touched on the, being able to kind of look at a space, and understand how it's going to fit within a person's or a family's lifestyle. But as you know, as an architect yourself, when you're working with clients to build that, dream, it's really a sanctuary for them. It's their life. So, what are some of those things that you do as an architect, creating that space that you were able to pass on to the agent when there is a space that's already, that the canvas is already kind of outlined, but there is some work. There's some things that, the conversations that you can have with your clients to kind of better get an idea of what type of home that you should be showing them.
I think the biggest thing is when you first start working with them, before you show them any homes, is really walking through their existing home. And that could, it may be a home, it may be their apartment, but they had hundreds of apartments they could have chosen to live in, and they chose that one. So really walking through their space with them and finding out what they like and what they don't like, because it's often easier for people to show you things than they are to express what they're thinking. So being able to find out what their needs are, what they like, what they don't like, what their goals, their dreams. So finding out those things, because you can walk into a home, but if you don't already know what they're looking for, it's going to be really challenging to, make sure that home aligns with what will work for them and their family.
Right. I think that's a really interesting way of doing things. I honestly have never talked to somebody that has said, walk through their existing home. But it makes so much sense, because just thinking about our own situation, we had a growing family if our agent had, walked through our house and said, okay, what is the reason for wanting to move?
Yeah.
That opens up, that answers a whole lot of questions when paring down those places to show us.
And I know a lot of people feel like they're not heard by a lot of, professionals, like all professionals across the board. So I think that being in their space and really asking them, questions about what they're looking for, they're most likely being asked questions they've never been asked before. So it's, that's serving them on a higher level, like really finding out who they are and what they need.
So for agents that are listening and that want to get, more information on how to think like an architect and it kind of get some of your insight, how can people find you?
Our website's soldbydesign.net.
Awesome.
So we have on there, we have a quick, just little PDF of like 5 ways to quickly gain some more information about how to think like an architect so that you can make more money. There's an ebook on there, and then there's also our workshops that they could sign up for that goes through the 4-part framework.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's such a cool concept, for somebody with, the knowledge that you have to kind of share that with an agent. Cause I think it's a little bit different than, what is out there, what is mainly out there.
Yeah, definitely. It just helps people think outside of the box. Do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Michael.
I want to thank Heidi for joining us today. And if you're interested in learning more, check out her website, soldbydesign.net. So once again, if you think you or someone else on your team has an incredible story or a tip to share with our community, send us a message at feedback@smartagents.com. Well, that wraps things up for this episode, but remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and we'll see you on the next episode.